Welcome to the BAM Beyond podcast. If you're new to BAM, we're a team of British, East, and Southeast Asian creatives who are passionate about entertaining others and uplifting the community.
From sharing heartfelt stories to exploring Asian culture and society, we believe in the power of representation and sharing our collective experiences to inspire and empower our community.
Our goal is to bring the British Asian community together and bridge the gap with the rest of the world. My name is Nicole.
I'm Jem.
And I'm Sophia.
And today we're going to be discussing about our dual identities and what we love about being Asian. We just thought we'd bring in some positivity with all that's been happening in the world recently.
Wow, thinking about it, when I thought about my first, I guess when I thought about being Asian and how it all started off, if I'm honest, I didn't always have the best impression of being Asian. Not so much because of the fact that, I didn't like being Asian, but more because I think when I was growing up, I've talked about it many times, that I grew up in a community where, it was predominantly white, and I felt very disconnected with other people because I was Asian. And it wasn't so much a case of that I didn't like being Asian, but because I had these differences, it felt really hard to connect with people because, when you don't have people who are like yourself, it's very hard to kind of connect with them on the similar level, whether it's your background and stuff like that, or cultural identity. I'm not sure how you guys feel about that as well.
I can relate. Yeah, especially growing up in a predominantly white area, the town that I lived in. I really disliked being Chinese. I really didn't like sticking out. I didn't like to be the other. I didn't like how the food that I'd bring into school was different, and people would always make comments about the smell, the look of it. And I just wanted to fit in. Yeah, I hated being different. So now that I've grown up, I'm in fact very much happy with my identity. I love being different now. To be honest, it makes me feel more interesting in a way, just because I get to enjoy the best of both worlds, obviously the British culture and then the Chinese culture. And in a way, instead of being I'm only Chinese or I'm only British, I've created my own special, unique identity. And there's also this whole community that we've been able to find. I mean, there are so many different communities, but the fact that as an Asian, we don't stick strictly to being friends with just Chinese, we can still relate with other Asian ethnicities. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel very similar to both of you. I think there are definitely times within my childhood, more so maybe my teenage years and late teenage years, so maybe 18 was probably the peak of it. I could probably say that I really hated being Asian. I hated being Filipino. I felt like around those years I was having such a huge identity crisis, because I felt like when I was younger, I was your typical good Catholic Filipino girl, really kept to the stereotype and did everything that had to be done. But then when I left home and I got to live my life for myself and choose what to do, I realized I also am very British, and then I felt like I was getting pulled into very different directions. And I really, really struggled with it, because I felt like I wasn't Filipino enough for the Filipino community, and I'd feel very judged by them because I was too British, but I'm also not white, and I knew that I was never going to fit in with white people. So it was a really, really rough time, and I remember having conversations with my family being like, I hate being Filipino. I just why would you to the UK if you weren't willing to the culture and help us fit in and blah blah blah. And yeah, it was a very painful time for me. But similarly to Nicole, right now I am so proud and happy to be Asian. And I can say that wholeheartedly. I think the issue is when we're younger, we kind of feel like we have to pick between two worlds, but really you don't. There is an identity within being British Asian, and that's something that I didn't realize. I didn't know very many British Asians, and that again is because I grew up in a very white town. And when you don't feel that sense of community, you feel really alone, and it's not a nice feeling. So I think you tend to like internalize all these emotions, and it comes out as hating your culture, and it's really sad. It's a really sad thing that all of us had to like experience some kind of like hatred for our heritage. um
Mhm.
but now that we've come to an age where, like, you know, we've all connected with one another, we've built up a community, and also being in London and seeing all these other British Asians around has really, really helped, and has made me feel like actually I'm not alone in how I've been feeling. I don't need to pick either or, I'm both. Yeah, so right now very proud, very happy.
Yeah, I think the key thing that we struggled with when we were younger was probably like the sense of belonging or their lack
Yeah.
of. And it doesn't help that our parents didn't go through the same thing. Obviously, like they had their own struggles as well, but I'm guessing our parents are all immigrants. Um,
Mm,
well, my dad was born in the UK, but he grew up in Hong Kong for most of his childhood. So I consider him as like from Hong Kong.
mm,
Um, yeah, and it's like we didn't have the language to share how we felt with our parents, so it was almost like a silent suffering, I would think.
mm,
Um, but no, I'm really glad that we're all very proud of our own cultures now, and I think especially now that like several I spent a year and a half in Hong Kong, so I got to be able to like get in touch with my heritage and really like, I guess, experience the Chinese life, but in a different way because people still see me as like the other over there. Like I'm not fully Chinese, but it was an interesting experience, and it just made me feel even more in love with being Chinese. Yeah.
yeah.
And also, actually, because I've spent time living abroad in different cities, it's been interesting whenever I met like someone who was also from Hong Kong or also from England, they instantly made me feel more comfortable, even though we may not actually share that many similarities in terms of like interests and what we do. But it's so cool when you meet similar people that way.
Yeah, I totally can relate. I think for
Yeah.
me, I struggled like when I was growing up. I felt like also because for me, like I'm half Chinese and half Vietnamese, and there was a constant conflict, not only for about the fact that I was British, Chinese Vietnamese, but also trying to having a conflict between myself. Like, am I more Chinese? Am I more Vietnamese? Why do I not feel like I relate to a certain, because like for me, like I grew up and both my parents were born in Vietnam, but my mom's like fully Chinese. And then my dad is like pretty much fully Vietnamese. And but both my parents only speak Vietnamese. And I'd never learned like Cantonese and I never learned, and I only started learning Mandarin when I was at uni because I felt like I wanted to learn more about my own culture. And I
Mm,
think that I definitely felt like that slight, you know, kind of like distance from people because I didn't learn Chinese. And every
yeah.
single time, obviously, people would see my surname and they would assume that I was Chinese. And I was like, sorry, I don't speak Chinese. And it became like a really common thing. But I think
Mm,
after time, I really learned to embrace it and I really learned a lot about my own culture because I feel like as I was growing up, like maybe because I spent so long kind of trying to deny the culture or like that part of me because I was learning so much about British culture to fit in. Like for example, like I think my friends used to take me out to go eat like British food, like English breakfast or having a Sunday roast or something like that, just so that I felt more British. But like thinking about it now, like whilst it's great, I learned a lot about British culture. Like I'm glad that I also kind of took a step back and started to learn more about myself, and it's really kind of built the identity that I have today. And I'm really thankful
mm,
that I've got to experience all the these things because you know I think especially at uni when I finally kind of integrated with more Asian people and I was like, there's people like me. And I guess like we also find that like sometimes we start to kind of like mm, I guess like group ourselves with people which we feel more comfortable or familiar
mm,
with,
mhm.
which is why I guess like a lot of people do say that like Asians tend to group together at times because they can relate to one another, and I totally
Yeah.
can relate to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is the thing though. It's so important for us to learn about our cultures because I think you both were born in the UK, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I was born in Philippines and I moved here when I was 4. And I kind of wish that I'd actually spent time in Philippines to really learn the culture more, learn about the history, and I don't know. I feel like I would have had a better sense of my identity at a young age if I had known that. And I think having moved here, everyone's kind of so desperate to assimilate so that life is easier. That my parents never taught me anything about like the real history of Philippines. It will come up in conversation here and there, but it was never like oh, so this happened, that happened. Like I don't know the national anthem. I don't really know anything other than the fact that I look Filipino and I can understand the language. Um, I I don't know anything really. But I think what's good now is that we're at and I don't know whether it's like our age or whether it's society now, like the whole like woke culture, but like
Hmm.
everyone is so like willing and also wanting to like understand more about their heritage. Like I have so many friends now who like purposefully and actively read up about their history and about like so one of my friends Akina, she is reading up about the tribes in Philippines, like back to like the old days before colonization, trying to find out more about like what tribe her family would have been in. And that's something that I never would have thought about and never would have learned about had it not been my friends. And I feel very lucky that I'm around people who are so like so knowledgeable and also just like very open-minded to try and understand that because as a result so am I, and I'm asking more questions to my parents and I'm reading more about it and having a better sense of like my heritage because I mean as much as I think you make your own future and like your traditions don't take up everything, it's still such a core part of you to know your past and about your culture and really understand it, rather than because I think if you just kind of feel like oh I look it and I sound like it, that isn't enough to really feel connected.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. But then I'd be interested to know like how you would find it to be if you spent more time like of your childhood in the Philippines before you moved here. Then the way you integrate into the British society must have been like would have been extremely difficult, probably. And
Mm,
I feel like at that age, say for example, you stayed in the Philippines until you were like your teenage years, early teenage, and then you moved to the UK for secondary school. I think that's what Sunny did, right?
yeah,
I
yeah, Sunny
imagine
did
it'd
that.
be a lot tougher. And in
Yeah,
fact, I think I would actually worry, like, if that happened to me, there might be a
huge
sense of like
culture shock.
hatred. There's a culture
Yeah.
shock, and also maybe a hatred for my parents because, like, why are you moving me to a different
Mm,
country? Like, all of a sudden, I just made my group of
yeah,
friends here, and now I have to adapt to a new place.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I say I don't think I would have wanted to have been moved in my teenage years because at that
Mm.
point you really know I say you really know a lot about yourself, but you have like the foundations of knowing kind of ish who you are, and you have like you set up a life. And I think I mean, especially looking at the kind of the culture in Philippines and it being very Catholic and very old fashioned and traditional, and then moving here where everything is very liberal,
Mm.
going from that like as a teenager, imagine like for example like like dating in Philippines, like you don't date when you're in school, you crazy, you have to finish school first, you're gonna get pregnant, blah blah blah, and then you move here and everyone is like dating, everyone is shagging, like it's and then you're just like oh my god, I know that I would like fully freak out.
Mm.
um I'm actually really curious to because I don't think I've ever spoken to Sunny about how exactly she felt about moving at a later
Yeah.
age. I'd be so
Yeah.
curious to know.
Oh, it would have been
Would
good
love
to
to
have
hear.
Sunny here actually to
Yeah.
talk about it, but I guess we'll have an opportunity to learn about it soon. But
Mm-hmm.
the other thing actually it made me think about was like, you know, going back to your home country, or like the country that you're ethnically from. So like for me, I think like as a kid, like I went to Vietnam when I was like 3 4 years old, and then I didn't go back until like 2 years ago. So like the gap
Oh.
between me going to Vietnam as a kid to now was
Oh,
like extreme. And honestly, I was really scared to go back because I didn't go with my parents for once. This is like the
yeah.
first time I'd ever gone back home. And obviously that meant that I had to depend on my language skills. And if any of you guys know me, my Vietnamese isn't fluent at all. Like I'm the type of person who would throw English words in when they really don't know what to say. But
Yeah, same.
so
Yeah.
like basically I went back, and it was really weird because like the first thing that happened to me when I first arrived was like my mom's friend or my auntie or whatever, she came to see me and she's like, oh, do you remember me? And it's like, that whole phase where it's like, I don't really remember you, it was so long
I
ago.
don't know who you are.
Like and then like also because like the language barrier as well. But I felt kind of, I really learned to love like Vietnam when I went back, because like I'd been
Yeah.
meaning to go back in so long. And then suddenly I went back, I got to experience, because I'm legal age, experience the nightlife, experience like eating out, and eating like eat, because it's so different eating home food from the homeland versus like going to a restaurant here and
Oh.
stuff like that. So I really, I don't know, like after going there I really felt like I connected more with my own culture. And and my Vietnamese actually improved so much in the period that I went back, just because
Mm.
when you're forced into a situation where you have to do something, like you really push yourselves to learn more. And obviously
Yeah.
I didn't have my parents to back me up at this point,
Yeah.
so I was just
Yeah.
really pushing to kind of practice my Vietnamese and connecting with old friends. Like I saw people that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. And it was so
Mm.
weird to see how much they had grown. And then just like lots of different things. So honestly, it was an experience, and I really can't wait to go back when we have a chance to as well.
Yeah. It's
Bam
amazing that
trip.
you went back with your family, without your family even. Because
Mm,
it's
Mm.
the experience is so much different. And
So
also, yes,
different.
BAM trip if possible.
yes.
uh, yeah, because as a kid, I would visit Hong Kong at least once every 2 to 3 years with my parents. So every time I went back with them, we'd be doing the same stuff. We would always visit all of our relatives, and there are so many of them, and we'd be sticking strictly to like one area, because maybe as a child, like my parents would think, oh, taking a kid out to the other side of Hong Kong is too much of a hassle, it's too tiring and hot. So I stayed mostly in the New Territories, which is kind of like where most of the villages are, and it's a lot more traditional and maybe like old
Mm.
school, some would say. um, yeah, so when I started to go back by myself, or when I had actual friends that I had met from maybe uni or like the internet or somewhere else, I got to really explore Hong Kong, and I grew a different type of love for it. It wasn't just like
Mm.
a second home. It was kind of more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have
Yeah.
you been
That's
to the Philippines by yourself?
no.
Mm.
I was just gonna say I'm very jealous that you guys have been able to do that. I've never done that. I'm always with my family. And my parents protect the shit out of us. Like, we will still take the jeep. And firstly, like I don't know if you guys have ever rode one of them, a jeep. I love it so much, but my parents always say don't speak when you're on the jeep,
Mm,
because like I can't speak fluent Tagalog, so I will speak predominantly English, but I can fluently understand it. And they're worried that like if I speak English, or my brother and sister speak English, then we're gonna get mugged. But
Oh,
things like that, like I have to, I'll be like walking around the street, and say if we go to like a market, my parents are like, nah, don't speak, you're gonna get kidnapped or something. So I walk around
mm,
in fear, like, oh my
oh,
god. But I had initially this plan back in 2019 when I quit my job and I was like looking for a job. I was like, if I don't find a job within this month, then I'm gonna go pack my bags. I'm gonna go to Philippines and live there for like 3 months and then travel the rest of Asia, which would have been in 2020. But then I found a job, so I feel like that was a sign from the universe: do not travel because COVID. Um, but I still really want to do it. The only thing now is that like my grandma, my ina, who I was gonna stay with, is like gone now, and it's like I'm kind of dreading the next time we go to Philippines, because a huge part of my experience and my feeling of belonging was tied to her. Um, and I think if I were to go travel there on my own without my parents, it'll feel really strange, because I a lot of the time the way I view Philippines is as a home, and I relate home to family. And one of the things I love the most, it's probably the thing maybe equal to food. The thing that I love the most about being Asian, being Filipino, is like the strong sense of family. Filipino families are always huge, they're always loud, like everyone's all together. You always just like, it's the best feeling in the world. And I don't know, as like every time I go, that's the thing I look forward to the most. But I think if I go on my own, it'll be more like, I don't want to say touristy because I don't want to do touristy, but I know I'll end up doing touristy.
Yeah.
Which like you said, Nicole, it might end up giving me like a new love for Philippines and seeing this other side of it,
Mm.
which is good, like a more well-rounded one. But I'd love to actually live there,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
The
and
experience is
like
just
day
so
to day
different.
life.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
when you there's like different ways you can go about traveling. Like for me, I think when I first went to like South Korea, for example, this obviously I'm not Korean, but like when I went, like I remember that like we were talking about the kind of experiences we wanted to live. Like there was elements of us that we wanted to do touristy stuff, but we also wanted to live as a local. Like what it
Local,
felt
yeah.
like, going out doing the things that we did, because obviously when you go to Asia, it's so different from like the Western world. Like the convenience of doing stuff, like, like going to 7-Eleven just to go get your stuff, or like there's like just those small things. And I think that's also another thing to like really appreciate about Asia, and like going to the country itself, like there's so much more to it than like, just like, our ethnicity and stuff like that, but also just the culture itself. Like I think there's parts of me which appreciate all sorts of elements of Asia, like, from the food to the music to the culture itself and clothing and everything. Like I can literally think about like how I was growing up and how all those different elements inspired me as a person. Like I
Mhm.
think we were even talking about the other day about how, like, our makeup styles, right? We were just talking about that. And I was actually like, oh my God, like my life back then used to be like circle lenses, and the style of my makeup was really like Korean or Japanese, and like
Mhm.
the things that I was into and stuff. I think it's just really interesting how much these cultures kind of become a part of our lives. And it's really great as well because I think Asian culture has really kind of like, it's just spread so far. Like I feel like the things that I used to like probably would have been judged. Like for example, like I was really into K-pop, and everyone was like,
Yeah.
oh, why
Yeah.
would you listen to Korean music? You don't speak Korean, or you
Yeah.
don't understand
Yeah.
Korean. But then like now it's so big and so like pretty mainstream now that it kind of
Yeah.
feels a bit weird. Like,
Like
Mhm.
BTS, for example, when I was in university, well, even before university, like secondary school, I was very much into K-pop. And I was still listening to K-pop and like Korean hip hop in university. And at that time, one of my friends, she didn't even know where South Korea was, or like had even heard of it. Like she didn't even know there was like a North and a South Korea. And now she's into BTS. And I messaged her and I was like, because we haven't actually spoken in a long time. I messaged her, I was like, oh, you're listening to BTS. Like University Nicole would have been so
yeah.
excited about this. And she was like, oh yeah, you went to study in South Korea. You were like so ahead of our times. I was like, that's just awkward.
Yeah, I've been there. Like when I look back at, or like for example, like I was really into anime as a kid, and then like growing up, everyone also kind of same kind of vibes, like such a weeb,
Yeah.
like kind of vibes. And then like I got to college, and everyone starts like watching anime for some reason. I was like, huh? Like, and anime isn't just limited to Avatar: The Last Airbender or Pokemon and stuff
Mm,
like that. Like, and then when I realized that all these people started watching these stuff and how far it has really grown over the years, it's really like, I guess like people have really learned to appreciate all these different cultures and, like learn about them. I mean, there's still,
Mhm.
I guess, there's some elements to criticize, but I guess looking on a more positive light, I think generally it's really great knowing that, people are learning more about it and
yeah.
they're not keeping to their bubble. Because I think that was the
Yeah.
most difficult thing for me growing up, because I felt like people didn't really understand. And
Mhm.
because now that like people are learning to educate themselves and learning to, really appreciate the culture, and like to the extent that,
Yeah.
they're traveling to these places, they're cute, they're talking, and it's one of the things that also kind of builds our interest in how we connect with other people as well, which is really
Hmm.
great.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
just like so many more hobbies to easily pick up because we've been kind of exposed to all these different things like from different cultures.
Mm.
So it's safe to say, like, we really enjoy like the best of both worlds. Of course, like we also suffer from like both kind of our ethnicity and also just being British.
Yeah.
There's the food that we all love, but I feel like we talk about food a lot and all the
All the time.
time. So we probably shouldn't be like going too in depth with that.
Oh my god,
Um,
yeah.
oh,
Like
one oh, did you want to say something?
no, I just remembered like literally at work they asked me what's your favorite food, and I was like, I can't believe you're asking this question. I don't know how to pick a type of food. I love every
I
so much
can't
food.
pick. I can't.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, what's your favorite cuisine? Oh, I just love
Yeah.
everything from like every culture. It's hard to pick.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think being Asian as well, like British Asian, I also really like being able to understand, more than one language, being bilingual. I can't say my Cantonese is amazing, but it's definitely better than it used to be. Um, and I like being
Mhm.
able to like pretend that I don't understand like one language depending on where I am. Like if I'm in Britain and someone's like
Yeah.
talking to me, they come up to me like on the street or something, I'm just like, don't understand. But if I'm in Hong Kong and I'm too shy to
Yeah.
speak in Cantonese and I'll speak in English, and then they might like talk about me in Cantonese, but I'd be listening.
Mm.
That'd be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. That's happened to me before. That's happened to me before in Philippines, and I cried.
Oh my
I was
god.
I
Okay.
was like I think I was like 14 at the time, and I was ordering. We were in the food court in SM. I was ordering some Jollibee, and at that age as well, I used to be like so socially awkward, and I used to get anxious about ordering things and like speaking at all. And my parents were like, no, you need to learn. So they were like, you go and order the food at Jollibee, and I was like, are you kidding? And then so I was like, fine, I'll go. And then I went and I was like, I'll say it in Tagalog because I think I can say it. But then I panicked last minute, so then I said it in English. But then the people working there assumed that I couldn't understand Tagalog, and they were like, they said "on ya bang ya," which means like, oh, she's so like up herself, like, and then they're like, she's speaking English, like she thinks like she's all that, blah blah blah, thinking I couldn't understand, and I was like, oh, I understand. But I didn't say anything, but I was literally like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I came back to the table and I was just like, I started crying. I was like, they were talking about me behind my back. And my little sister, who also is extremely quiet and is like complete opposite of me. Like I'm very nowadays anyway, I'm very outgoing and confident. She is like very shy. When we walk past these people, she just screams at them. And bear in mind, so if I was 13 or 14, she was like 10 or 11. She screams and I'm going, we understand Tagalog, and then like walked away. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, your sister's
Oh my
brave.
Yeah.
god.
So it's tough.
Yeah. I think language is a really
The
amazing
memories.
way to communicate though. Like I think it's fun
Yeah.
knowing when you can speak several languages, and also like because of the music that I listen to, I felt like I picked up so many random languages. So now that like I guess in terms of music and stuff like that, like I would be like I can sing in several languages, but it doesn't mean I can speak in several languages. But it's
Yeah.
kind of funny sometimes, like whenever like I like go to karaoke and like sing random songs and stuff like that. But I think that's like kind of another thing about appreciating like there's more to culture and stuff like that than language with everything and music, and it's a really great way that you can connect like just how like we used to get looked down upon listening to music that we didn't understand. Now it's like something that is like pretty common and a really great way to connect to people. Like you don't need to understand this to connect with people that
No,
way.
exactly.
and
Mm.
Exactly.
and another funny situation. So you talk about Jollibee. I think another time. So honestly, when I go to a country, the first thing I learn how to say is few things I learn to say is one, I can't speak said language. Two, like, can you speak English? And three, where's the bathroom? But but because of like these things, like I always get some really interesting experiences when I try to say these things. So like I was in like McDonald's, right? And but usually there's like a
Yeah.
touch screen thing, so I can avoid speaking to people because you can change the language option. But then one time we went to McDonald's in Korea, and I was like, ah, shit, what do I say? So I literally was
Ooh.
like, I'm gonna brave it. I'm gonna do this. So I go up to them in Korean. I'm like, 영어 할 수 있어요. So like, I was like, oh, do you speak English? And then they were literally like, they were like, oh yeah. And then like this girl, like she, her eyes are gleaming, and she's like, oh my god, I can practice my English kind of thing. Like
Oh,
she was so
That's my
happy.
chance.
Yeah, because I think also it's so different from when you learn English than when you actually speak it. Right. So I think this
yeah.
girl was just so excited that she could finally use the English that she's
Use
probably
it.
learning. And we're just kind of having like a casual conversation at McDonald's. Just because she was just like
Aw.
after ordering my like meal and stuff. I thought it was really cute. That's why I was like,
That's so sweet.
it's really nice to know, when you have that sort of mutual acceptance kind of thing,
Connection,
that you're like,
Mm.
acceptance, yeah.
I understand. Oh, I get you. Don't worry, I got you.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved hearing all those different stories. And I'm just so glad like we've all become so accepting of our identities.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
hoping that like for the future generations and for example like our future children, if we have any, like I'm sure they will also have their own issues that they'll have to overcome, but hopefully like we'll be able to guide them
Mhm.
as they grow up, having to,
Yeah.
I guess, experience like having a dual identity or
Mhm.
something like that. Because especially actually nowadays, like I'm assuming like some of us will obviously be dating people with a similar background, like another British Asian, or like not even from Britain, it could be from another country. So then that's gonna be like another culture in the mix.
Another level. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
Yeah.
it's
I
gonna be
do have
interesting.
it's definitely gonna be interesting, but I feel like I have a lot more hope for a kind of kinder place for our like future kids. Just even
Mm.
like for the sake of like looking at the media now, because there's such a big push on representation, and even like say the little companies like us, like with BAM, but then like bigger companies like Disney, like releasing the first Southeast Asian Disney princess. Like it's starting, and it means so much to me, because I think that was another part of why a lot of us couldn't accept ourselves when we were younger, because we couldn't see ourselves in certain roles and on TV, and you're kind of taught to be ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
um but now that there are things that represent us and we can feel a lot of pride for our identities, it's really exciting, and I'm hoping that like that'll only continue to grow. And I know right now is a really tough time, especially for the Asian community. um but like I think this, sadly, but also I guess it's a good thing, it's kind of all brought us even closer together, and unite as like one big force. Because I think often as well, when I was younger, within the Asian community, it's still quite segregated, where it's like the Chinese, the Filipinos, the Vietnamese, it's like they never really mix. But our generation of Asians are all really mixed, and we all love each
Mm-hmm.
other, and we're all like fighting for one another, and that I think will really create like a much more hopeful and better future for the next generations.
Yeah,
Mm.
I get goosebumps just seeing like all of our communities coming together and
Yeah.
solidarity.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly love it
Yay.
because I just honestly, because of everything that is going on, and I'm really thankful that we are as open-minded and supportive of each other. And even like in BAM, it's really interesting to see how all of us like we all come from different backgrounds, but yet we're here today trying to uplift the community and do what we do to help and represent ourselves in the media. So I hope that in the later years down the line, we can be those people that people can look up to and realize that, hey, that there's people like us who are doing this, so we should strive for that too. Because I think that was
Mhm.
the one thing that I wish we had growing up, but I'm thankful that
Yeah.
whilst it's still growing and there's still improvement needed, I'm glad that we can be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proud of you
Yay.
guys. Proud of us.
Ah,
All right.
well,
uh, I have so much. I
how
have
do
so
we
much feeling for everything.
so
Like,
so many feelings, so many feelings rushing through my body.
oh my god,
Ah,
it's been a
this was really
really
lovely.
heartwarming conversation,
Yeah,
and I really hope
it's been
that
really uplifting.
mm, that our listeners can also share their experiences as well. And I hope that you guys do appreciate the fact that you're Asian, or whether you're not Asian, if you appreciate the culture, appreciate the people. Like, it's, I'm really glad that we can be in a world like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and of course we are a community, so any listeners, if you want to like send us a message and talk about this further, we'd be so open to it, and we'd love to connect with you. And if you're at a point in your like life where you're feeling a disconnect, message us. Like, we've all been there. I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone always gets to a point where you feel that disconnect, and we'd love to help you feel more connected.
exactly.
You
That's,
can,
I was gonna say exactly. That's what BAM is all about.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Bridging the gap, right?
Yeah.
So
Wait,
we
I was gonna be
are on
like,
Discord. If you want to join the community, like feel free to join our Discord. The link will be basically everywhere. You can just Google
everyone.
BAM and Beyond and you'll find us,
You'll
honestly.
find it.
Well, if you're listening this on a podcast stream platform, then you can also watch the video on our YouTube. That's at BAM and Beyond, BAMNBEYOND. Damn, I haven't spelled this out in a long time. Yeah, you can also find us on Instagram with the same handle, as well as Twitter and Twitch. We stream, I think, on most Sundays. There might be
Mhm.
changes coming up, but we'll
Yeah.
definitely keep you updated. And feel free to support BAM and Beyond by buying us a coffee or checking out our merch. Did I miss
Yes,
anything?
please.
Yeah. If you guys also want to support, don't forget to subscribe to our Twitch. Help
Mhm.
us. We're doing great things there. And also, if you guys do happen to be on Clubhouse, we also have a club, so follow us there, because it seems like a good majority of the band members are on Clubhouse these days. So yeah, I think that's everything covered. It's been really great listening and
This
talking
has
to you
been
guys, especially
lovely.
as Nicole has been taking a
Yeah.
break for a while. So
It's been like 2 months.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, this
thank you
has been
guys.
great. Thank
Thank
you. And
you.
to our listeners and viewers, do take care. Just we're literally just a message away if you ever need anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
We love
speak soon.
you.
Love you
Bye.
guys. Bye
Bye. Love you.
bye.
Bye.